right, back here at the NFL Combine. One final day in Indianapolis. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and pleased to be joined now by Mike Golic Jr., co-host of the GoJo and Golic podcast. And we'll tap into your Notre Dame expertise in just a second, but we should begin with the headline news, which, for all we know, could have 7 twists and turns before we get to the end of it. This Stafford thing is very interesting, and I think people on the outside, that don't have boots on the ground necessarily in L.A., really understand it. They're like, the guy's making crazy money. Why does he want more? And it's just like market value, last kick at the cat at age 37. And then it's like, well, then what the hell is the problem with the Rams? It seems like they know what's on the horizon for them in terms of big second contracts for a lot of those defensive players that are going to come up here in a couple of years. So a long-term contract for Matt is just doesn't seem it's like in the cards for the Rams.
Yeah, I think it's franchises in different places, right? Where the teams that we're talking about in this sort of love triangle right now, in the Las Vegas Raiders and the New York Giants, they're searching for anything resembling the success that the Rams have had. The Rams got to the mountaintop with Matthew. Everything you wanted out of that trade, you have already gotten, and then some. And he's been an incredible force. Sean McVay rants and raves about him. But they have that familiarity inside the building. And the one thing about the Rams as an organization, especially with Sean McVay, they would rather be early than late in figuring out what they're going to do at that spot. And maybe there's part of them that says, hey, we understand, given the mileage on Matthew already, the style of play that he has, and the opportunity that we've got here to maybe start to think about resetting the clock at quarterback in line with the youth on our roster. Listen, would I advise it? No, probably not, because I think you are in a great spot in the way the NFC West is right now to be highly competitive if everyone's healthy at the right time. But this is an organization and a leader in Sean McVay not afraid to make a tough decision if it comes down to it.
And you're right. Everything they've gotten out of Stafford this last year and anything going forward is gravy on top of what they've already gotten out of him. And now, flipping it over, if you're Stafford, the Raiders got some appeal, less of an uproot for his family, closer out to the west where they're living. Now, brand new head coach. You've got a young tight end that's actually doing really well, but you're moving into a division that is dominated by guys in Kansas City. You've got an up-and-coming squad in Denver, and Jim Harbaugh in L.A. has also got those guys turned around. So that's that division that you might move into if you're Stafford. Then you got the NFC East. If you're the guy, if you're Stafford, what's your preference? East Coast with the Giants. If you win in New York, that's best. What are your thoughts about those teams? Which one would be the best fit, and which one would be more of an immediate win? Both in the win column and personally.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you look in the New York side of that, Malik Neighbors, and what he showed you early on that he can do as a receiving threat. And it's no disrespect to Brock Bowers, who impacts the game in so many ways and had an offensive rookie of the year type season were it not for one of the quarterbacks being as prominently featured as he was. But there's nothing that can tilt the field like an outside receiver that can have the impact, especially with speed the way that Malik Neighbors does. That being said, I mean, and without being able to know how important the proximity with family is and what their appetite is to move, I would still probably lean Las Vegas. I just think New York is such a long way away, and you could be dealing with, if things don't go well again, another coaching change there with Brian Daboll walking back into this difficult situation.
And there's also the state tax that you have to talk about, too.
No state tax in Las Vegas.
If you're going to sign a deal, say if he signs a 2-year deal for
$100
million, that's 8 digits right off the top.
And listen, if you're wanting to get your just reward and what you deserve, like $50 million, we all hear that in ooh and ah. We saw how much the salary cap just went up.
Right.
There are, I think, 9 quarterbacks making $50+ million a year right now. And, I mean, of that 9, I don't know how many of them you'd say on their best day are automatically better than Matthew Stafford, even at this point.
Even the guys who aren't on that list either.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, so
like Josh,
like Pat, So
speaking of quarterbacks, I feel like Minnesota's in a very weird spot. It's a good problem to have because you have 2 possible options, but you've seen this before in the league where they sign. I don't want to call Darnold a retread because he's clearly better than that with the year that he had. But a guy, journeyman. Thank you. That's probably better. You sign a journeyman as a fail-safe. McCarthy, tears up his knee. He can't play. And now your plan, which was probably let's play Darnold a year, get McCarthy up to speed, and if he looks good, we'll plug him in. And now, Darnold's going to be a free agent, and it's like we still don't know anything about McCarthy. They know more than we do,
sure.
But you know what I'm saying. The evidence isn't there on the field at the NFL level. How do you square that if you're, Mensa and, KOC? How are you squaring that? Because you know what Darnold is. You're not sure what McCarthy is. It just seems like the risk-reward is, I don't know.
It's pretty sizable. What I'd say is you also understand what your infrastructure is there, and that's part of the reason that you got the best out of Sam in a way that
right.
other organizations weren't in position to, because you know what you've got around him in that offense led by Justin Jefferson and a receiving core that's got plenty of options. You know when healthy what those tackles can be. The world, how different it got when Christian Darrisaw went down. Him and Brian O'Neill and the way that they can balance that thing out, but then with Kevin O'Connell as the play caller. I mean, all of that helped get Darnold to that point. So you've got to have a number. I think there's a number somewhere that could make sense to say you bring him back on a shorter-term deal, especially front-load the guarantee. So everyone throws around the deal that we just saw for Daniel Jones in New York, but something palatable like that, unless you know, to your point behind the scenes, J.J. McCarthy is where we need him to be recovering physically from that injury, so he's going to be ready to get some of this offseason in time to be the guy hit the ground running. The way it seemed like he was trending towards early in camp last year, you've got to know that behind the scenes.
All right, so from the other side of that, here's the rub for me, because Darnold putting up a monster year can probably convince some other team that is quarterback needy. His agent could probably get one of those teams to offer up a 4-year contract or even a 5-year contract, where the Vikings are probably looking at a bridge deal because they eventually want to get to McCarthy. If you're his agent, but at the same time, to your point, at the same time, to your point, though, it's like, is he going to look as good somewhere else as he does with O'Connell?
That question is Darnold crazy to leave?
For the right number, no. There's always a number that someone can put in front of you that, listen, no one in this league is guaranteed the life of any contract that they're on here.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed the number that's on the page in that column. And so if someone wants to put, again, I get Sam was a first rounder. I get he's been around and made a bunch of money already. But, man, to be able to cash in what could be your last time to do this if you're Sam Darnold, knowing what's coming down the pipeline in Minnesota, I think if you're in a number where all of a sudden the guarantees are getting close to that $90 to $100 million range, and you are getting 3 or 4 years of security in the way that that's built, that's tough to ignore. Knowing, like you said, that, yes, environment's better. You'd love to be in that locker room culture in Minnesota, but that money is hard to ignore.
All right, so we've got the Myles Garrett thing. Obviously, the Bills are in need of a pass rusher, an alpha male pass rusher, that is.
Everybody's in need of Myles Garrett.
But the issue here sits more with Cleveland and the $36 million dead cap hit. Now we hear reports that the Eagles could be in on trying to acquire Garrett. It starts with Cleveland, though, and they're not – you heard Andrew Berry this week. He's not moving off. When does he give up the ship and say, you know what, he doesn't want to be here? When does that happen? Because you're getting close to, the nitty-gritty here. The league year starts in 2 weeks pretty much.
I think to your point, it happens, and it's got to before the draft. Because if you're going to recoup that, one of the things you want is a significant amount, a Godfather offer, which he's worth. And I think the timeline the Browns are on right now, considering the way they botch quarterback, it would behoove them to reset everything and say, hey, we mistimed this, we missed out on this. Let's get what we can out of it while Myles Garrett is still at the peak of his powers, and then go on from there and make sure we've got that going into the draft.
One of the other things going on at this draft is the competition committee met, and you as a former offensive lineman, they're thinking about saying, yeah, you can't do that tush push thing anymore. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm fine if they want to get rid of it.
How will they do that?
I think they'll just, limit, guys can't aid the runner anymore and just be more specific in how they call that. I know they've struggled with that, and that's been part of the issue to begin with. Maybe put other parameters in how you can do things formation-wise with that. However they came about it, if they wanted to truly get rid of it, I'd be fine. I just think the reasoning for getting rid of it sounds soft. Like Green Bay ends up getting outed as the ones that were coming out and pointing to the fact that it's not a play that requires skill, even though there's only really 2 teams that do it at a high level in Philadelphia and Buffalo. Like, I'm sorry, having a quarterback that's a battering ram, that's a choice. Having an offensive line that big, that's how you build your team. If another team wants to build a team that's got a quarterback with a howitzer for an arm who can spray it all over the place, that's fine. That's the strategy that they've employed. Right. Why are we going to knock 1 or 2 teams? When we moved the extra point back, it's because everyone was converting at a 99% clip,
right, I get
and
that.
It made the play unfun. This one, we've got a couple of people doing it better. That's strategy. That's football.
Yeah. James Cook obviously wants his money. There have been talks with the Bills, and it seems as though both sides are committed to working towards a compromise, a middle ground, if you will. To me, the $15 million number he threw out is just public posturing, because if you look at the comps, there's no way he's getting $15 million a year. He has 100 fewer carries this past season, which was a good season for him. 100 fewer carries than Saquon, 100 fewer carries than Josh Jacobs. One guy got 12.5, the other guy got 12. They were enormously more productive than him. And the Bills have a third down back in Ty Johnson. They have the young kid in Ray Davis. They're going to manage his carries. He's never going to be a 300 carry back. I'm thinking 10.5 to 12 is probably where they're coming in for average annual salary. Can't you structure it in such a way to make him happy? Like, you sign him to like a $33 million deal for 3 years, so it's $11 million average annual value, but you put 25 in the first 2 years, so he's getting 12.5 a year. Can't you do something like that?
And I think we've seen that kind of bear out in the last few years with the pay the people have done. Just inch a little bit past what the franchise tag would be, front load it to your point, and do it while these guys are young. That's the other advantage here, is getting these guys in their mid-20s, their mid to late 20s, for running backs in this position, we know is the prime years. And so I think, like you said, in most negotiations, that first number out's the trial balloon that's there to kind of shock and awe everyone. Will go, well, of course he won't get that. So when you come in at this other number, now it feels a little bit better. James is a great player. I want to see every guy get paid. But that number was always going to be unrealistic. Knowing what you said, I think I saw the usage rates the other day. For all those other backs, is up around 75%. For him is below 50%. And that's just not going to be what people are paying. If we're paying weapons, you've got to be a weapon much more available than that if you're going to command 15 a year.
What do you think is going to happen at the top of this draft? You think Tennessee is the team that picks it?
I think they pick it. I think they still, now that we've heard that they're not going to do surgery on Abdul Carter, I think he's going to go number 1 overall. Yeah. I think having a quality pass rusher like that, my God, with one arm, the things I saw him do to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish team that I love was enough to make me a believer. And so now that we know that's surgery and will hopefully won't affect his workout at Pro Day, I think that will be the guy.
Especially since they're already allowing Harold Landry to engage in trade conversations with other teams, or at least his agency. Right. He's out the door. They need that guy even more than ever. Yeah. Mike, appreciate the time here at the end of the week. Safe travels to get back home, and maybe we'll catch up with you a little bit later on in the offseason.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.